Hello grade 8s and welcome back to WorksheetCloud. This is grade 8 English and I'm glad that you've joined me again. Last week we pretty much did parts of speech and today we're going to change it up a bit. If you have a question during the lesson, please send an email to grade8@worksheetcloud.com. Hello again, I'm Mrs. Goslet. I've been teaching you grade 8 English. And this is my last week, so I'm sad to see you guys go, but I am happy that I could help you and hopefully teach you a few things during this time. If you could please grab a notebook and a pen for me, you're going to write down maybe some things that you haven't heard before, or you're just going to sit back and relax and enjoy the lesson. Today, very exciting, we're going to be looking at a short story. Now in grade 8, you do different genres. You do short stories, you do folklore, you do drama, which is Shakespeare, and you do a novel, which is like a reading book. At my school we do Goodnight Mr. Tom. Love that book. If you haven't read it, please grade 8s, do yourself a favor and read Goodnight Mr. Tom. The boys will enjoy it and the girls will also enjoy it. It's just such a wonderful book to read. Then let's get straight to it. Now today we're going to be looking at Monkey's Paw. You might have done it already, or you might do it next year, or you might not do it at all. But this is a short story and we're going to look at it. And here's just a quote we're going to go through. Fate rules people's lives, and those who interfere with fate suffer the consequences. So this is going to lead us into what is Monkey's Paw. Now when we look at it, it looks really quite scary. And if we look at the top there, it says 1 wish, 1,000 regrets. So if you can get your hands on the short story, I'd love for you to also read it. We're going to look at a quick summary. So sit back and relax, of the Monkey's Paw.
The story is set in England around the turn of the 20th century. It opens with the elderly Mr. and Miss White and their son Herbert in their cozy family home one stormy evening. Father and son are playing chess while Miss White knits by the fire. From their conversation, it is apparent that they are expecting a visitor. He soon arrives and is introduced by Mr. White as Sergeant Major Morris. The family welcomes him warmly as he relaxes with a drink. He tells them exciting stories of his time in India, then under British rule. Mr. White remarks that he would like to see the strange and exotic sights of India, but Morris says he's better off at home. Mr. White remembers the strange tale of the monkey's paw that Morris recently told him. Morris is somewhat reluctantly shows them the paw and declares them that an old Indian fakir placed a spell on it. As a result, according to Morris, the paw has the power to grant 3 wishes, but brings disaster upon the wisher in the process. Morris then tosses the paw into the fire, but Mr. White hastily retrieves it. Morris warns him to have nothing to do with the paw. However, the Whites are curious, and Mr. White ends up buying the paw from Morris. After Morris leaves, the Whites decide to put the paw to the test. Mr. White admits that he can't think of anything to wish for. Herbert suggests that he asks for £200 to help with the mortgage. Mr. White wishes upon the paw and is shocked when he feels it move in his hand. Nothing else happens, and Herbert scoffs that he's not likely to ever see the money. After this, Mr. and Miss White retire to bed. Herbert remains in the room for a while, imagining pictures in the fire. Finally, he sees a strange monkey-like face in the flames, which frightens him. Reaching for some water to pour on the fire, he accidentally touches the monkey's paw, which alarms him further. In this rather unsettled mood, he heads for bed. Next morning dawns bright and cheerful, and Herbert is able to scorn his misgivings of the previous night. He jokes with his parents about the monkey's paw, then leaves for work. Miss White continues to tease her husband about having made the wish, but she too appears to be on the lookout for something to happen, and is disappointed when the morning mail only brings a bill. However, she's intrigued when a well-dressed stranger unexpectedly turns up at the front door. She makes him as welcome as she can, believing that he is bringing them good news about the £200. In fact, he has come to tell them that Herbert has been killed in an accident at work. The old couple are utterly devastated at this news, but there is worse to come. The stranger says that they will receive £200 in compensation, exactly the sum that Mr. White wished for upon the monkey's paw. At this revelation, Miss White screams aloud and Mr. White collapses in a faint. After Herbert's funeral, his grieving parents return to the family home, which now appears desolate. A few nights later, Mr. White awakens to find his wife lamenting their son at the window. Then she startles him by suggesting that they should use the monkey's paw to wish Herbert alive again. Mr. White is utterly horrified at the thought of summoning their son back from the grave, especially as he was mangled beyond recognition of the accident. However, Miss White is too excited to listen to reason and forces her husband to make the wish on the monkey's paw. Then she waits by the window, but no one comes. In great relief, Mr. White returns to bed, and after a while his wife joins him. Presently, Mr. White gets up again to light a candle. While on the stairs, he suddenly hears a soft knock at the front door. Terrified, he rushes back to the bedroom. His wife is roused by the commotion, as she tries to pretend it was just a rat making the noise. However, the knocking grows louder. Miss White is ecstatic, believing that her son has indeed returned, and hurries downstairs to let him in before her husband can stop her. Mr. White is left with only one course of action, to make a final wish on the monkey's paw. We are not told exactly what it is, but when he makes it, the knocking stops abruptly. When Miss White opens the door, there is nobody there.
Okay, so it's quite an interesting story. I always like to give background information on the writer. It's just extra. You don't have to know this particularly, and they'll never ask you a question about this. So let's look at it. The Monkey's Paw was written by W. Jacobs, and there's the date of when he was alive. The Monkey's Paw was first published in 1902. Jacobs grew up in a working class family in London, where his father worked as a manager of the South Devon Wharf. His father's profession would greatly impact Jacobs' later work, as he earned fame for his sea stories and humor writing. By the mid-1800s, Britain had taken control, directly or indirectly, of most of India. Many Britons at that time feared the otherness and foreigners of the colony would negatively impact British culture. So you learn about in the story that this Indian guru talks about this monkey's paw. So he gets his inspiration from this whole actual real life at that time. Right, so let's look at it. In literature, we always ask you to fill out an analysis sheet. An analysis sheet just has the introduction, the rising action, the climax, and the conclusion. So we're going to look at the introduction. The fancy word for introduction is exposition. So you must remember that, because in a test or exam, they could ask you, what is the exposition of the short story? So you can make a note of that. So in the introduction, we are introduced to the White family. They are a happy family. A game of chess with its accompanying friendly banter creates this warm and loving mood. However, outside it is storming and the night is wild. And I've got a little box here because it's quite important that you take note when you're reading elements like that. It could be a bad omen, and they usually use weather to show that a bad sign or something bad is going to happen. So here I've got the weather sets the appropriate scene for the tempestuous, conflicting events that are about to take place. So we learn about Sergeant Major Morris, who visits the White family, and he introduces this monkey's paw. The rising action will take us and build it up all the way to the climax. So we have Mr. White, who takes the paw against the old soldier's advice. So he says you mustn't do it. And he makes his first wish. Remember, he said he struggled to think of something, and the son, Herbert, says, "Dad, why don't you wish for $200? Before long, the news of Herbert's death and the compensation money from Moore and Meggins is brought to his parents. In Mrs. White's sadness after Herbert's funeral, she persuades her husband to use the paw to wish their son alive again. And remember, in that summary, we found out that he was not comfortable with messing or summoning his dead son, because he also spoke about how mangled his son was in the accident. And you're also playing with fate and destiny, and you don't know what the consequences will be. So he's quite against it, against his better judgment. But I think he wants to make his wife happy, and she is so upset, and she wants to do anything for her son or to bring him back. Then the climax of the story. So we have a knocking on the door, which sends Mrs. White into an ecstasy of excitement. She believes it's her son. And Mr. White realizes with horror what must be outside. So he just knows it's going to be bad. His son will never be the same again. So he doesn't actually want this to happen. Mr. White frantically uses his third and final wish as his wife struggles to open the door. Denouement. That is pretty much conclusion. So silence falls and Mr. White runs outside to find the street deserted. Nothing good has been achieved by invoking the magic of the monkey's paw, and the two old people are left totally alone. So they never received that $200 continuously, and they actually lost their son in the process. So it shows that magic is not like in Aladdin, where genie comes out and grants you these 3 wishes. I love that movie. It's so cute. Okay, we're going to look at the characters. Now, it's so important that you write this down or make a mental note of it. You have to know what a protagonist is, and you must know what an antagonist is. They love to ask us questions in exams or tests. They will ask you, who is the protagonist? Or they can ask you, what is a protagonist? And a protagonist is the main character of the story. It's the hero in, let's say, superhero movies. But also the antagonist is always going to go against our protagonist. Okay, and that was pretty much the monkey's paw. They did not help our poor white family. So let's look at the protagonist. We have Mr. White. He's an old man who's tempted to change fate. And he realizes and suffers the consequences. Jacob's characterizes Mr. White as a man who cannot accept his own fate, and that's why he wants to change things. Then we look at Mrs. White. She represents happy, domesticity is present in the house. That's just being domesticated at the beginning of the story. As she knits by a cozy fire, she soothes her husband's temper, and she enjoys spending time with her son, so they have quite a close bond. The appearance of the monkey's paw disrupts this whole happy family. Okay. Then we have Herbert. He's happy. He's a loving son to his parents. He represents how even the skeptic can be briefly made to believe in the ability to magically alter fate. So he also buys into this monkey's paw. Okay, then we have other characters. So they don't play a major role, but they are necessary for the story to develop. Okay, and you must know all the characters, especially when you get tested on it. We're going to look at the subject and the theme. Now, subject is just, what is it about? So it's supernatural and there's death involved. It's almost like what the story is about. Then if we look at theme, now in your head you must know theme is the message. What is the message of the story? So we've got fate versus free will, the uncertainty of reality, desire, and greed. And these are messages that we can take out of the story. They only require you to give one. So always memorize one that you feel comfortable with, that you will always link to the story. I feel like fate versus free will is a very obvious one. Or you could even design greed. Because if they didn't have this need for change, because they were so happy, then they wouldn't have ended up with the consequences of the son dying. Okay, this is just some of the themes that we're going to discuss. So desire and greed. The monkey's paw is a symbol of desire and greed. Everything that its owner could possibly wish for and the unrestricted ability to make it happen. So I think all of us live in this, especially when we're younger, we have this fantasy of, I did with a genie in the bottle, or my brother would always say to me, if you had 3 wishes, what would you wish for? I used to love playing that game because I would say, I can still remember, I would say, I would wish for another wish. And then he would say, you can't do that. But I said, but you said I can have I have 3 wishes. And my other wish is to wish for another wish. So we used to always end up fighting and laughing about that. I wonder if you all also maybe wished for that. Then this power makes the poor alluring. It's so attractive because if you have 3 wishes, you can wish for anything you want. All your dreams, all your desires can come true. Okay, so even to unselfish people who desire nothing and have everything they need, it makes it appealing to them. It draws you in. We're going to look at fate versus free will. And you can write down a point or 2 or just make a note for me if you're not sure. Mr. White struggles to accept his fate in life, and so many people do, because society tells us this is what you're supposed to have to be successful. Money, fame, what else makes you successful? So if I can just have those things, then I'm going to be so happy. But he has everything that he wants. He doesn't realize that. So that's why he keeps on to change his fate. He is given the paw, which has the power to grant wishes. Mr. White believes he can force his will on the world and intervene with fate without there being any consequences. His wish, which was for money, has far-reaching consequences. The money comes as a payment after his son dies at work. So it's almost like if you wish for something, something bad is going to happen in return. There's a consequence for it. The author wants to suggest that it's best to make the most of life when we are given rather than arrogantly trying to interfere through easy and treacherous ways. So he's trying to show us that it's best to make the most of what we have and not always want, to change our fate. The next one we're going to look at is the uncertainty of reality. So he wants us to question what is real and what is not real. Morris's stories about the paw's powers could just be imagined, or it could be fictional, could be made up, imagined. And Herbert's death after the first wish could have had many causes and just be coincidental. It could have been accidental and it had no relevance to the paw. Or the author wants you to think that it could be supernaturally linked, that because they got the paw, because they used a wish, there was a consequence. The writer leaves the reader to decide whether the events are natural or supernatural. In the end, the suggestion, the continuous ambiguity is when something is not clear or it's a bit confusing, suggests that the possibility of something being influenced supernaturally can change our reality and cause them to behave in unwise and unpredictable ways. Okay, now in short stories or even in novels, we always have a symbol. And let's look, we know the symbol is this monkey's paw, and it's supposed to represent guilt when dealing with the loss of a loved one. The paw as a symbol as an anxiety due to foreign aspects, as the paw comes from India, so that was linking to, that time. It is also a symbol of desire and greed. Okay, so this can represent many different ideas. Also, fire, predominantly present in the first part of the story. Now, we didn't get to read it together. We just got a little summary, because we'd be here forever if I had to read it to you. Shame. The fire is seen to be burning brightly. This connects with the warmth and happiness of the White family. Although they are not rich, they are comfortable and happy. Okay, and that's supposed to create this calming and this happy and warm mood. Right, before you go, I hope that you enjoyed this lesson. It's just a little introductory, or just to have a fun change of pace from language. I really hope you do the story in your school, because then you'll know exactly what's going on. After this, please have a look at the activity that I've loaded for you. There's some questions, and you can do some answers for me. That would be great. And then again, if you have any questions, please send us an email at grade8@worksheetcloud.com. We always do motivation, grade 8s. So I've got here, every day is a new beginning. Take a deep breath and start again. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Mrs. Goslet. This lesson was brought to you by WorksheetCloud, and I'll see you later.